Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to week number 3, lesson number 5 of the Call of the Wild. Last we left off, or last I assigned for homework, you were supposed to finish reading chapter 2, the Law of Club and Fang, and make your way to chapter 3, the Dominant Primordial Beast. So if you've done that, wonderful. If you haven't done that, take some time to read the rest of chapter 2 where we left off in the last video and finish that up, and then watch this video for chapter 3. If you are reading along with me online, then go into the video description right below, and there's a little link right there, and that link will take you to the book online. Once you open that page, just go ahead and click on chapter 3 or go to chapter 3, and that's where we're going to start for today. For those of you who are looking for a paper copy of the book, some of you have reached out to me, go ahead and have your parents email me with some of the bookstores that are nearest to your house, and I'll see what I can arrange in terms of having a book sent to you, or having one ready for you to pick up, or something like that. That way you can have a copy of either The Call of the Wild or Peter Pan if you're also doing that book. Okay, great. Is there anything else for me to cover? Oh, lastly, those of you who are watching the videos consistently, thank you. Those of you who are just joining on this video, thank you. Try and get everyone to be watching these YouTube videos as much as possible. Because if you do, for one, you're going to be learning a lot, which is awesome. This is the main way that I'm teaching my English classes for the rest of the foreseeable future. And two, you're going to be entered into a drawing for completing homework and YouTube videos on this side. So remember, there's the Khan drawing and the YouTube drawing. And so this will enter you in the YouTube drawing, and you're in the chance to win a $25 gift card, which is pretty sweet. So keep watching. And remember to come to our Zoom calls from 8:30 to 9 o'clock every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And also the social Zoom calls from 2 to 2:30 every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In the academic calls in the morning, we really have been talking a lot about the books, getting some really cool discussion done. And I'd love if the rest of you guys would show up, because it would be like normal class, right? Which is great. That's what I look forward to, is having those cool discussions about the book and what you think and why you think someone is good or bad. I mean, you guys are all so brilliant and insightful. So please keep showing up to those Zoom meetings. And if you haven't showed up yet, come on there. We would love to seriously see you. I would love that. All right, cool. With all that spiel over with, we're going to pick up on chapter 3, the Dominant Primordial Beast. I might stop a few times, but hopefully I can get a little bit of reading done. All right. Chapter 3. The dominant primordial beast was strong in buck, and under the fierce conditions of trail life it grew and grew. Yet it was a secret growth. His newborn cunning gave him poise and control. He was too busy adjusting himself to the new life to feel at ease. Not only did he not pick fights, but he avoided them whenever possible. A certain deliberateness characterized his attitude. He was not prone to rashness and precipitate action, and in a bitter hatred between him and Spitz, he betrayed no impatience, shunned all offensive acts. In the beginning here, in this right-away paragraph of chapter 3, we get to see some of the characterization of Buck as he ascends into this wild, right? So he's left the rules of society behind, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in the chapter. But he's also gained an understanding of who he is in this wild land. He's assimilating and changing into the wild. And by doing so, we're seeing some important qualities of who he is as a foundational person, as a foundational dog, and as a foundational character. Some animals are not super nice in the wild, as we're about to find out, and other animals are still what we would consider to be morally good. Buck doesn't try and pick fights with other dogs. He's deliberate in his attitude. It means he does things on purpose and with thought. He's not rash, so he doesn't act out of just impulse or emotion. He really thinks things through. And he's patient, right? He is not offensive. He's patient and thoughtful. These, in the normal world, are what we would consider really strong qualities of leadership. Patience, not necessarily violent or aggressive, not rash, deliberate in action. These are all things that we would say a natural leader has. And so again, on that theme of leadership, we see Buck here as an exemplary leader. On the other hand, possibly because he divined in Buck a dangerous rival, Spitz never lost an opportunity of showing his teeth. He even went out of his way to bully Buck, striving constantly to start the fight which could end only in the death of one or the other. Early in the trip, this might have taken place, had it not been for an unwanted incident. At the end of this day, they made a bleak and miserable camp on the shore of Lake Laberge. Driving snow, a wind that cut like a white-hot knife, and darkness had forced them to grope for a camping place. They could hardly have fared worse. At their backs rose a perpendicular wall of rock, and Perrault and Francois were compelled to make their fire and spread their sleeping robes on the ice of the lake itself. The tent they had discarded at Daya in order to travel light. A few sticks of driftwood furnished them with a fire, and that thawed down through the ice and left them to eat supper in the dark. Close in, under the sheltering rock, Buck made his nest. So snug and warm was it that he was loath to leave it when Francois distributed the fish which he had first thawed over the fire. But when Buck finished his ration and returned, he found his nest occupied. A warning snarl told him that the trespasser was Spitz. Till now, Buck had avoided trouble with his enemy, but this was too much. The beast inside of him roared. He sprang upon Spitz with a fury that surprised them both, and Spitz particularly, for his whole experience with Buck had gone to teach him that his rival was an unusually timid dog, who managed to hold his own only because of his great weight and size. Francois was surprised too, and when they shot out in a tangle from the disrupted nest, he divined the cause of the trouble. Ah, he cried to Buck, "Give it to him, by God, give it to him, the dirty thief." So even Francois is urging on the fight, because he thinks, hey, Spitz took your spot, you got to fight for that dominance. You guys got to settle this. This is the Wild. Spitz was equally willing. He was crying with sheer rage and eagerness as he circled back and forth for a chance to spring in. Buck was no less eager and no less cautious, as he likewise circled back and forth for the advantage. But it was then that the unexpected happened, the thing which projected their struggle for supremacy far into the future, past many a weary mile of trail and toil. An oath from Perrault, the resounding impact of a club upon a bony frame, and a shrill yelp of pain heralded the breaking forth of pandemonium, which is absolute chaos and wildness. The camp was suddenly discovered to be alive with skulking furry forms, starving huskies, 4 or 5 score of them, so a lot of starving huskies, who had scented the camp from some Indian village. They had crept in while Buck and Spitz were fighting, and when the two men sprang among them with stout clubs, they showed their teeth and fought back. They were crazed by the smell of food. Perrault found one with head buried in the grub box. His club landed heavily on the gaunt ribs, and the grub box was capsized on the ground. On the instant, a score of the famished brutes were scrambling for the bread and bacon. The clubs fell upon them unheeded. They yelped and they howled under the rain of blows, but struggled none the less madly till the last crumb had been devoured. In the meantime, the astonished team of dogs had burst out of their nests only to be set upon by the fierce invaders. Never had Buck seen such dogs. It seemed as though their bones would burst through their skins. They were mere skeletons draped loosely in draggled hides, with blazing eyes and slavered fangs. But the hunger madness made them terrifying and irresistible. There was no opposing them. The team dogs were swept back against the cliff at the first onset. Buck was beset by 3 huskies, and in a trice his head and shoulders were ripped and slashed. The din was frightful. Billy was crying as usual. Dave and Sol-Lex, dripping blood from a score of wounds, were fighting bravely side by side. Joe was snapping like a demon. Once his teeth closed on the foreleg of a husky, and he crunched down through the bone. Pike, the malingerer, leaped upon a crippled animal, breaking its neck with a quick flash of teeth and a jerk. Buck got a frothing adversary by the throat and was sprayed with blood when his teeth sank through the jugular. The warm taste of it in his mouth goaded him to greater fierceness. He flung himself upon another, and at the same time felt teeth sink into his own throat. It was Spitz, treacherously attacking him from the side. I'm going to pause here for a second. This is a moment where we really get to see the true law of the wild here, right? Not the call of the wild necessarily, but the law of the wild, okay? In society, right? Humans have built society. We've built houses and buildings. If you look around yourself, you're probably in a house or a building right now. If you go outside of that area and you walk or you drive around, you're going to see more houses and more buildings. And we also have built laws, we've built government, we've created money, we have rules to follow, we have social norms and expectations. We have a lot of expectations, right? When we walk through the hallway at school and I say, hey, how's it going? And you're having a bad day, you don't just punch me in the face. No, that's not okay, right? In society, that's breaking a rule. We don't have that kind of violence. It won't be stood for, right? It won't stand for it. In the wild, it doesn't matter. There is no honor. Maybe there's a little honor, but there are no rules other than to survive. And the only honor you have is to survive well, and maybe to take care of others while you're doing it. But if you can survive, you've made it in the wild. There's no society. There's no buildings with rules and government. There's only the law, like it says, of club and fang. And as it gets more wild, the law of tooth and fang, right? Well, fang and teeth are the same. Claw and fang, I guess you can say. Tooth and fang. That was ridiculous of me. Tooth and fang. I was all into it. Tooth and fang. But anyway, claw and fang. In the wild, rules disintegrate. Okay, society disintegrates. And this is an extremely common theme in all of literature. Meaning like whenever in Shakespeare, or in the case of Jack London here, or in Kurt Vonnegut's stories, maybe Joseph Conrad's stories, Ernest Hemingway's stories, as characters, whether they're dogs or humans or whoever, as they venture deeper into a forest or a jungle or a Sahara desert or any kind of a wild area, rules and regulations and social norms and expectations break down. The way people act breaks down. Think about Lord of the Flies. As they were more integrated into the wildness, they broke down their rules of civilization. Same thing, unfortunately, Animal Farm was an examination of the opposite happening, which is an interesting theme. But no, I think generally speaking in literature, once you venture farther into the wild, you lose more rules. And so here, all of that is to say, Spitz isn't necessarily breaking any rules. Although it's not quite honorable of Spitz to attack Buck while they're fighting off these other animals, it's not necessarily wrong. Spitz is trying to survive, and he sees Buck as a major threat to his survival, to his leadership. And so he's taking an opportunity to survive. And this is the way the wild functions. This is something that Buck is learning, and this can be translated into a theme for real life as well, if you take your time with it. Okay, I'm going to continue reading a little more, and then I've got some homework for you. Perrault and Francois, having cleaned out their part of the camp, hurried to save their sled dogs. The wild wave of famished beasts rolled back before them, and Buck shook himself free. But it was only for a moment. The two men were compelled to run back and save the grub, upon which the Huskies returned to the attack on the team. Billy, terrified into bravery, sprang through the savage circle, and then fled away over the ice. Pike and Dub followed on his heels, with the rest of the team behind. As Buck drew himself together to spring after them, out of the tail of his eye he saw Spitz rush upon him with the evident intention of overthrowing him. Once he was off his feet and under that mass of Huskies, Buck knew there would be no hope for him. But he braced himself to the shock of Spitz's charge, so he held his ground, and then he joined the flight out onto the lake. Later, the 9 team dogs gathered together and sought shelter in the forest. Though unpursued, they were in a sorry plight. There was not one who was not wounded in 4 or 5 places, while some were wounded grievously. Dub was badly injured in the hind leg. Dolly, the last husky added to the team in Dia, had a badly torn throat. Joe had lost an eye, while Billy, the good-natured, with an ear chewed out and rent to ribbons, cried and whimpered throughout the night. At daybreak, they limped warily back to camp to find the marauders gone and the 2 men in bad tempers. Fully half their grub supply was gone. The Huskies had chewed through the sled lashings and canvas coverings. In fact, nothing, no matter how remotely eatable, had escaped them. They had eaten a pair of Perrault's moose-hide moccasins, chunks out of the leather traces, and even 2 feet of lash from the end of Francois's whip. He broke from a mournful contemplation of it to look over his wounded dogs. "Ah, my friends," he said softly, "maybe it make you mad dog, those many bites. Maybe all mad dogs. Sacre dame! Won't you think, eh, Perrault?" The courier shook his head dubiously. With 400 miles of trail still between him and Dawson, he could ill afford to have madness, or potentially rabies would be what they're talking about, break out among his dogs. 2 hours of cursing and exertion got the harnesses into shape, and the wound-stiffened team was underway, struggling painfully over the hardest part of the trail they had yet encountered, and for that matter, the hardest part of the trail between them and Dawson. We're going to stop there for today. This part of the trail is very arduous. You're going to be reading for homework the rest of chapter 3 and writing a little summary on it. Okay, so for homework today, read chapter 3 all the way up to chapter 4 and write a summary on what you've read. And as an added bonus, for those of you who are working a little harder, please also write in any extra symbols, themes, or motifs that you notice, things that are not just a summary of what's happening, but a critical analysis of what's important in the book, why it's relevant to our lives. You can talk about the theme of leadership, the theme of surviving in the wild, the theme of freedom, anything else that you see. You can talk about the symbol of the fire, that's going to come up in a few paragraphs, the symbol of ice, the symbol of a journey, any of those things. So either write just one paragraph summarizing the rest of the chapter, or 2 paragraphs, one as a summary and the second paragraph being some critical analysis of the chapter. So I want to remind us that although Buck is dealing with the difficulty of being kidnapped, the difficulty of harsh men, these men are okay, but some in the past were harsh, the difficulty of his own friend dogs being mean, and the difficulty of wild animals attacking them, he's also dealing with the difficulty of the natural world, this wild area, being increasingly difficult to walk through. So, I just said the word difficult 5 times because Buck is in a difficult situation. And so with that, I do want to call back to that famous Nietzschean phrase, which has been so used popularly pretty much for the last 2 centuries since he said it, which is, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? Whatever Buck is going through may kill him, in which case he's dead, or he'll get through it, and he'll be smarter and stronger and more cunning and a better version of himself all around. And this too is a theme. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That theme perseveres throughout the book, so you can talk about that as well. Okay, I'll be signing off for today. I hope to have all of you guys watching this video and coming to my Zoom chats on Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8:30 to 9 a.m. to talk about it, and send your homework to me either on the chat, on the Zoom chat, or through email. Whatever way you can get it to me works. I'm just happy to have you guys participating and having a chance to win that YouTube drawing gift card. With all of that said, we are done for today. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your days, and I'll see you in another video on Thursday or in Zoom. Later.